What's up guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'll be showing you how to do the Baki pose. So first things first, this is a pretty advanced skill, be aware of that. Especially if you're a beginner at calisthenics, try not to rush into more advanced skills. I'd recommend at least be experienced in doing a couple of intermediate calisthenic skills, such as a free handstand, maybe even some planche tuck holds, planche leans, just enough to the point where you're comfortable on your wrists, holding your whole entire body. Because the Baki pose puts a ton of pressure on your wrists, especially using one hand. Make sure you stretch and warm up. Do a lot of wrist warm-ups, do a couple handstands. I warm up and stretch with a lot of different moves, and it's gonna take too much time if I explain every single move. So to make it easier, I'll be setting up the camera into a time lapse, show you guys how I warm up and stretch before I start doing the Baki pose. Okay, now that we're all stretched and warmed up, let's get into the first couple steps on how to get into the Baki pose and some common cues. First step, if you can get into a deep squat, do that. If you're a little bit high, that's okay too. We're just gonna start in a simple deep squat. This is where I wanna choose which hand I wanna do the Baki pose in. Let's say it's my left hand. I'm gonna bring it across to the opposite side or to the right. Deep squat, pick an arm you wanna balance on, bring it across. Kind of like doing this stretch. My goal is to get that elbow around the middle of that thigh. If you're wearing pants or you're wearing a long sleeve, it could be a little bit difficult because you might be sliding. Just keep that in mind. I bring my elbow across like this. So for some of you, or at least when I started doing it, it was putting so much pressure on my leg, but you kind of have to build that strength over time and you'll definitely get used to it. I bring it across, and let's say we're on a straight line here. I don't want to keep my fingers pointed completely away from me. So I want to turn it to a certain degree outside, not inside, outside. Not too much, but just a slight turn to your liking. Once I get here, I'm gonna reach with my free hand, almost aligned with my posted hand, and I'm gonna use my legs to lift my butt up until I can start releasing my leg pressure a little bit here. So I'm keeping my knees tight together, my toes pointed. This is the first step. That's the entry of the Baki pose every time. So try to balance in that freeze position. It's almost like a breakdancing freeze. Hold that for a couple seconds and we'll move on. Before we get into the next move, let's just talk about the common cues so you guys don't forget. Deep squat, you pick an arm you want to balance on. It comes across to the center, almost to the center of your outside thigh. And I kind of want to like hook my elbow across so it feels like I'm tight and wedged and pinched together like this. If I imagine a line here, I don't want my fingers completely facing away from me. So I want to turn it to a certain degree outward. Notice how I'm bending my elbows and I'm lifting my hips behind me to the sky and dipping my head forward to gain height to lift up my legs. Shifting my hips up and down. Try to get comfortable with that. You can start with your toes and the feet still on the ground spotting you. When that becomes too easy, start to lift it up and move up and down only using your hands. Now that we got the entry technique down, let's try and figure out how to release that ported hand or the forehand. Most of the time you'll see people rush to it and try to grab their shoulder and they fall either on their butt like this or they'll fall completely forward like this. Don't worry, if you already tried the Baki pose and you started doing those mistakes already, I've been there. It took me so long to figure out, and I could even show you some little progression clips. When you get into the entry, try not to rush your hand because that's only going to mess up your balance, and your whole entire body adjusting to that single hand isn't fast enough to react. So you have to release your hand slowly until your body can adjust where the balance is, and then you grab your shoulder. When I first started doing the Baki pose, I kind of kept sending it until I saw a couple other people do it, and I was noticing the hip change and the hip shift. Again, when I started doing the Baki pose, I'd get here, I was good enough to hold my legs up, and then when I released, I kept falling. So it's important to know where your hips are, and a good thing to keep in mind is to keep driving forward, not too much to where your head's lower. You don't want to dip too low to the point where your toes or your feet are over your head. Kind of want to be aligned with it. And then you want to shift your hips and twist your legs a little bit forward. Not too much to the point where now my toes are aligned with my fingers, just a little bit before my toe line meets my pinky line here. So that's a couple of details I learned on my own. Be aware of that. Now let's move on to how to release our hand and just get straight to the point. When your hand is posted, it's always better to stay as wide as you can with your fingers, because if it's narrow like this, you don't have enough space to balance. As I scoot back, I want to try to have my forearm almost in a straight line, because when you get into the entry, your arm's a little slanted. Once you start to lift your hips up, you want to scoot back until it's in a straight line. And then I bring my hips towards you. And from here, I'd recommend to start doing hand taps. So what I mean by that is, as I get into almost releasing my hand and finding good balance, I'm going to slowly tap up and down to not only build that body awareness, but also to build strength on that single arm over time. So it'll look something like this. I'm slowly gonna tap with my hand. As you can see throughout that movement, my whole body was adjusting the whole time to find that certain balance. That's a point where everybody's weight is different, and you kind of have to find that sweet spot for yourself, similar to a handstand. Another thing that helped me, I would find a surface just like this, and I would use that to get into my entry, just to get used to different positions, so I build good body awareness. That's mostly all the tips I use to get my first Baki pose. Hand face out, I post with my other hand. I lean forward so that my head's aligned with my feet. And I'm shifting my hips up. I'm twisting and I'm shifting slightly back until I can do some hand taps. And then finally to the Baki pose. Hopefully all these tips help. I mostly think it all depends on how your body works, but those tips and those certain cues helped me a ton. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, share this to your friends. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at RafKG. Feel free to tag me and DM me on either of those platforms. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.